This is the new re-release of the Leica M6 rangefinder camera. This video won't be a traditional review, technically speaking. There are plenty of those out there, as well as detailed technical specs and breakdowns of this camera and its previous iterations. However, it will be a review insofar as I'll give my opinion on it and my experience shooting it, as well as why you might want to choose this over other options, or why you maybe shouldn't buy one. I'll also give a basic comparison of how this is different to a few other popular Leica M film cameras. When making this video, I surrendered to the fact that I wouldn't be able to please everyone, especially when it comes to something as popular as the M6. But I'm okay with that, as I'd rather just be honest and authentic with my thoughts. This video isn't affiliated with Leica, so you can trust that I'll do exactly that. It is sponsored by my friends at Pixpa, but that doesn't affect my thoughts. I didn't buy this camera. I was lucky enough to borrow it for a short period from Darren, a friend of the channel, who was nice enough to trust me with his brand new M6, so big shout out to him, and feel free to check out his work on Instagram using the link in the video description. The new M6 costs 9,390 Australian dollars or 5,300 US dollars at the time of filming this video, which means it's not very accessible to the vast majority of film shooters. It is a fantastic 35mm rangefinder, however, and is a nice addition to the MP and MA, which are the other models that Leica still sell and make brand new. I own the Leica MA, which you might know from watching this channel, but I bought mine secondhand a few years ago for less than half the price of this. The only difference between them is the lack of light meter in the MA and some other build plus cosmetic aspects. Between the M6 and the MP, the main differences are the same cosmetic ones, such as the style of the advance lever and rewind crank, the finish and leather, and other minor features. Therefore, price between all three of them is very similar, and availability will probably be the main limitation going forward. The new M6 is almost identical to the original, with a few key differences being things like the material of the top and bottom plate, the leather, and the new viewfinder in this version, which is definitely the most functional difference since it is an upgrade and is less prone to flare. The viewfinder is really crisp, all the controls and advance feels satisfying, and the shutter is super responsive. And it feels about as heavy as my MA and just as grippy. So did the M6 make me shoot any better on the street or turn my photos into those of legends who used one like Trent Park? Of course not. It did perform as expected though, without a single hiccup, and gave the exact same refined Leica rangefinder experience as many of the other models out there, including my Leica MA. So I prefer shooting 28 and 35mm lenses out on the street, which is the perfect kind of lens to use with the M6, and this one was loaned to me with the 35mm Leica Sumerit on it. And the great thing about an M rangefinder like this is the optical viewfinder window and rangefinder system. The way I like to take advantage of that is to preset my exposure settings and focal distance or range, and then all I need to do when I see a shot is just frame and click. If you're watching this video, then you probably already know about the pros and cons of using a rangefinder system, so I won't go on too much about that. But in summary, it's a unique experience, which the M6 provides a perfect example of. So out on the street, the M6 didn't perform any differently to my Leica or the previous one I had before that, which was the M4. This is because I've heavily built a habit over the years of not relying on the light meter. In fact, when I tried to use it during regular usage case scenarios, it slowed me down. I was second guessing myself and checking my estimation against the M6's, which at a certain point became counterproductive, partially because of the way the light meter works and how wildly it varies depending on which part of the scene you point it at. But remember, a lot of this is habits, which could be retrained. Having the light meter in there might be nice, especially if you only plan to look at it occasionally and pre-meter scenes, so to speak. Even more so if you shoot slowly or predominantly do portraits or other work, which could benefit from having the built-in meter. There's absolutely no harm in having it, and if my MA was swapped for one of these, I would not really notice it in practice. But the other thing about the light meter in many Leica cameras, including the M6, which I don't like, is the way it works fundamentally. I don't find it intuitive with the arrow and dot systems, since you don't know how far off the suggested exposure you are until you get very close, where you'll see both an arrow and a dot illuminated. It's like the meter is just messing with you by telling you if you're hot or cold, rather than telling you where you need to be, which makes it just work a little bit slower. I've never been a fan of meters like this because my mind prefers to have some kind of representation like an analog needle such as the one in the Leica M5 or in my Nikon FE, which I prefer over the Nikon F3 for the same reason. Even many other cameras that adopted digital meters usually show some kind of scale, which is a proven system that's still used in digital cameras today. So this might be an unpopular opinion, but I really don't like this type of meter, and it's one of the biggest flaws in my opinion. I'd go so far as to say it's crap and seems like an oversight, but that's just me. And technically speaking, it's accurate and works fine and is especially handy when shooting in indoor situations or other tricky lighting situations. So I can see why someone who shoots a lot of mixed lighting or indoor work, like maybe Matt Day, for example, would easily go with something like the M6 over other Leica options. But the reason I use Leica is for faster paced street work or travel, which is generally outdoors. So not having the light meter built in is not a deal breaker for me, especially when it's a type that I don't enjoy using. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's take a quick break so I can thank the sponsor of this video, which is Pixpa. Pixpa is the easy, affordable, all-in-one website builder for creatives that I've been using for years now. Being completely unskilled in this area, I find their builder easy to use with a large variety of templates. You can set up an online store to sell prints and zines, or create your own blog. As a photographer, one of my favorite things is the client galleries, because even though it's sometimes good enough to just Dropbox your photos, other times it's neater and more professional to deliver them in an organized manner with a range of controls for privacy, downloads, proofing, and more. All in all, Pixpa simply offers the best value for money and customer ratings that I could find for a service that's perfectly suited to photographers and other creatives. So check out the link in the description to try Pixpa for free and use my code for a discount on your first annual plan. Now let's touch a bit on value and build quality because I had quite a few questions about this when I put it out on Instagram. In my opinion, the value for money with this or any new Leica film camera is pretty bad if you were just speaking broadly. You can get a lot more for your money, and that includes going for a second-hand one and factoring in the cost of any service. At least at the moment. I know the price is going up, but that's still my opinion on that. But on the other hand, they have the unique ability to hold their value really well, even more so than digital Leicas. Will this still be the same in 5 or 10 years? I don't know. It's hard to say given the continually rising cost of film. Right now, though, it's a pretty safe investment or gamble if you want to look at it that way. And speaking more subjectively, the value might be great if you're someone who would use it heavily, and the genre of the work you do depends on having this type of camera. It might even be a better investment than buying a second-hand one, which might be decades old compared to this and more liable to need repairs or service. And that becomes even more likely if you use it quite heavily. Now, focusing on the actual build quality, 1 week simply isn't enough for me to make a really long-term or in-depth conclusion, but from what I could see through my limited time using it, the build quality was great, and it was about on par with my Leica MA. The one thing is, it would have been nice if they ditched the plastic ISO dial and used the metal one like the MA has, which in my opinion is a lot nicer. Again, I can't speak to the overall quality control since that's a game of much larger numbers, so you'd be better off doing your own research and making your own conclusions or judgments there. But I'll just remind you that anything is subject to some incidence of issues or variation, including luxury goods. Another thing about a camera like the M6 is that because of the electronic light meter, it almost is certain that it will die someday. Whether or not you can still get the light meter repaired in 5 or 10 years is questionable, whereas the mechanical components are more likely to be serviceable. So what are some alternatives to the brand new M6? Well, obviously you've got the second-hand ones out there. There's the original M6, the M6 Classic, and the price of them should still be considerably lower than this. Now, I know at a certain point it becomes where you can just maybe justify that little bit of extra cost in order to have a nice brand new one in the box. And that's a one-of-a-kind experience. So I don't blame you if you're in that boat and price is not really as much of an issue. On the other hand, if you're not stuck on this particular model, you have a lot of other used Leicas like the M4P or the M4 II or the Leica M5. You have a bunch of other ones you can get like the M2, the M4, and even secondhand MAs and MPs maybe that have been on the market for longer. So really depends on what you have available to you, the prices that you have in your region, and how much you're willing to spend. If you're really fresh to the whole rangefinder game, I would even suggest you start with something that isn't a Leica, like a Japanese rangefinder of some kind, Canonet, Voigtlander Bessa, anything else really, if you just want to try the rangefinder experience before investing this heavily in it. So the moral of the story is that these kinds of decisions are not best to be taken lightly. When investing in a camera restricted to 35mm film usage in today's day and age, $5,300 is a lot of money for the body only. It's a lot to pay, not to mention the ongoing cost of film and processing. Sure, this camera is legendary, sure it performs beautifully for the type of photography that it excels in, and sure, I think it's absolutely great that Leica has re-released this model and made it available again in today's digital day and age. But don't just be seduced by the allure of this brand or model. If $5,000+ is a lot of money to you, if it's an amount that you have to spare, then go for it. All I'm trying to do is temper your expectations and share my honest opinion on the reality of buying one of these brand new. As I always say when I make these kind of videos is don't just take my opinion on it or the opinion of some other YouTuber or the fact that a photographer that you like or admire uses one. Do some varied research, weigh up what the pros and cons are for you versus the price. And if you can justify it, then this makes an excellent choice that Leica has added to the table. So thanks for watching my video today on the new release Leica M6. I hope you enjoyed and you got something out of it if you're in the market for one or if you're just curious on my take on this camera. And I'll see you in the next video.